Somewhere in the South Pacific, there's a patch of ocean where, if your ship's engine died, the nearest human beings wouldn't be on any shore. They'd be above you, 400 kilometers straight up, moving at 28,000 kilometers an hour. This is the most isolated place on planet Earth. No one lives here. No one has ever lived here. And at the bottom, in the cold and the dark, lie the broken bodies of nearly 300 spacecraft. Welcome to Point Nemo, the place we send our machines to die. Here's the first strange thing about it. For all of human history, nobody knew this place existed. We found the poles. We mapped every coastline, named every island. But the loneliest point in the entire ocean? It was never discovered by a person standing on a deck. It was calculated. In 1992, a survey engineer named Hervoye Lucatella fed the true shape of the Earth into a computer and asked it one simple question. Where is the single point in the ocean farthest from any land at all? The answer was a dot in the middle of nowhere, 2,688 kilometers from the nearest speck of dirt in every direction. He named it Nemo, Latin for no one. To put that in perspective, when astronauts on the space station pass overhead, they are closer to a ship at Point Nemo than any other human alive. The loneliest place on Earth isn't really on Earth's terms at all. Your nearest neighbors are in orbit. So what do you do with the most remote place on the planet? Somewhere no one will ever stumble onto. No coastline to wash up on. Nobody to hurt. Simple, you make it a graveyard. For decades now, the space agencies of the world, Russia, America, Europe, Japan, China, have used Point Nemo as a target. When a satellite or a station gets too old to fly, they don't just let it fall randomly. They aim it, right here. Somewhere between 250 and 300 spacecraft now rest on this seabed, including the entire Russian space station, Mir, an ocean nobody visits, quietly holding the wreckage of the space age. And the water itself is just as eerie. Point Nemo sits in the dead center of a vast ocean current that blocks nutrients from ever reaching it. It is one of the most lifeless stretches of sea on the whole planet, a biological desert, which means it's exactly what it sounds like, a dead zone full of dead machines. Quick thing before we get to the part with the sea monster. And yes, there's a sea monster. If you like the kind of video that takes you somewhere genuinely strange and actually true, subscribe. It's the only reason I get to keep making these. Okay, the monster. In 1997, underwater microphones picked up a sound near Point Nemo. Not a whale. Louder than any whale that has ever lived. Loud enough to be detected by sensors 5,000 kilometers apart. Scientists called it the Bloop. And here is where it gets genuinely unsettling. Almost 70 years earlier, in 1928, the horror writer H.P. Lovecraft had written about a sunken city called Lair, the tomb of a sleeping monster named Cthulhu. And he gave that city map coordinates. Those coordinates sit just a few hundred kilometers from Point Nemo. A writer in 1928 had pinned his monster's grave almost exactly onto a place no human would even calculate for another 64 years. The internet, as you can imagine, completely lost its mind. So, was it Cthulhu finally waking up? No. It was ice. Scientists eventually traced the bloop to an ice quake, a colossal iceberg cracking apart off the coast of Antarctica. The creepiest sound in the ocean turned out to be the planet shrugging. A little disappointing, honestly, but that coincidence with Lovecraft, I still can't fully explain it, and I've stopped trying to. Which brings us to the strangest part of all. Right now, 400 kilometers above your head, the International Space Station is still flying. The single most expensive object human beings have ever built. Around $150 billion. 16 nations, decades of work, and people who spent their whole careers up there. And around the year 2030, when it's finally too old to fly, we are going to bring it home. by aiming it on purpose at Point Nemo. The greatest thing we ever built off this planet will end its life as a streak of fire across the sky in a field of wreckage on the loneliest seabed on Earth. A Viking funeral for the space age, in the one grave we built just for our machines. And here's the part that's actually about us. India is no longer a guest in this story. By 2027, India plans to put its own astronauts into orbit. By 2035, its own space station, the Bharatiya Antariksh Station, circling the Earth. And one day, like every station before it, that one will grow old too. When it does, there is really only one place on Earth safe enough to bring it down. The same cold, silent water. Which means somewhere in this century, a piece of India's space dream will very likely come to rest right here, in the graveyard at the end of the world, lying beside the machines of every nation that ever dared to leave the planet. So here's my question for you. We built a tomb for our proudest achievements in the most remote place we could possibly find, somewhere no one would ever see it and no one would ever mourn it. So is that a graveyard? Or is it the most fitting monument we've ever made? Tell me in the comments, and tell me the one machine you think truly deserves to be down there. If this took you somewhere you didn't expect, like it, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.